It's a Tuesday Fenway Rundown, June 10th. I'm Chris Cotillo, Sean McAdam alongside. The Red Sox are home, and so are we. And yesterday brought the big news everybody has been waiting for, something we've been talking about on the show for weeks, months, and even years. Roman Anthony is up with the Boston Red Sox. MassLive was on top of it. Big credit to colleagues Katie Morris and O'Day, who was in Worcester, and Chris Smith, who was working on a travel day. We had the game, you and I did, Sean, and it was Roman Mania. It was all about him since the news broke around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and he's here. And plenty of thoughts on that. We've been talking about when it was going to happen. Wilyer Abreu's on the injured list. Roman Anthony is a member of the Red Sox. Let's get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we have been talking about it for a long time and trying to figure out what would have to happen, what were the circumstances that would lead to Anthony's promotion. We thought it might involve taking Ceddanne Rafaela out of center field and moving Jaron Duran from left to center, thus opening left field for Anthony. As it turned out, it was more like the scenario that brought his good friend and teammate Marcelo Meyer here, and that is an injury, though this does not appear to be serious. As you mentioned, Wilyer Abreu on the IL with some left oblique soreness. Doesn't seem like it's going to be one of those things that lasts a long time, but enough to create an outfield opening. And why would you go bring up anybody other than the top prospect in the game? I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when Wilyer Abreu is healthy again. Obviously, he's going to be pretty much an everyday player. So is Jaron Duran. What does that mean for Ceddanne Rafaela, his use, his position, how he's used? And does Roman Anthony stay? Are they going to evaluate how he looks? I'm sure they're going to evaluate how he looks over these next 10 days to 2 weeks. How are his at-bats? Does he feel comfortable up here? Is he adapting to big league pitching? But for now, he's here, and that's what so many Red Sox fans have been waiting for. I would just caution, and this should be obvious, that to expect that Anthony is going to hit the ground running and play like some, 2025 version of Barry Bonds here over the next couple of weeks is not realistic. We've seen both Christian Campbell and Marcelo Meyer struggle in adapting to the big leagues. And I would expect, as good and promising and talented as Roman Anthony is, that we're going to see some of the same with him. And I think people, in addition to the Red Sox, have to be patient.
Yeah, and I have a few thoughts on it. And number one, now that he's here, I think the onus is on Alex Cora more. You have the talented roster and all the kids are here, all that stuff. And, there's no excuse of, oh, are they worrying about service time? They're worrying about that with him. Is it a perfect roster? Of course not. And you can even argue that despite the hype around Meyer and despite the hype around Anthony, they're a worse team with those guys up and Bregman and Abreu out of the lineup. I mean, Bregman was so good for those first 2 months. Abreu has been up and down, but still one of your better hitters hitting at the top of the lineup. So that's no knock on Meyer, Anthony, of course, but it's not like you have these guys joining, your best offensive players. They're replacing them, and there's a big difference there. And it does, kind of change, I think, the excitement around it the day Meyer came up. The bigger story was really Bregman being out for a while. It looks like it's going to be shorter than we anticipated then. Yesterday, this Wilyer thing doesn't seem to be a huge deal. The other thing, just, the hype train, it's going to be hard for this kid to live up to what it has become and the legend, the man, myth, the legend over the last couple weeks. And so, wholeheartedly agree with you on the patience. We saw last night kind of the ups and downs, right? The liner he hit off Shane Baz was like the hardest hit ball you've ever seen. Not really, but it felt like it in real time, 111 miles an hour. And then the game sped up on him, and he made an error in right field that did prove costly. So, there are going to be bumps in the road. If you look at Meyer, he's got an OPS around 720. It's not 850. It's not 600. There's been ups and downs. He's been steady at third. Campbell, we've talked at length about his April was great. His May was horrific. That's just what it is. And I also think it would be faulty to think that we're going to never see any of the three of them go back to AAA for any reason. This still remains a crowded position player mix. It's only going to get more crowded when Bregman comes back, Abreu comes back, Yoshida, if he ever does, gets into the mix. And so, these are big days for the Red Sox organization that these guys are going to debut. But to caution patience, I think, is the understatement of the early part of the season, really.
Yeah, and I think there's a good chance that in 10 days, 2 weeks' time, whenever Wilyer Abreu is deemed healthy enough to come back and play, that you could see Christian Campbell go back to create that roster spot for Abreu to come up or to come off the IL, and Roman Anthony stays, because that would in turn open up the possibility of a platoon, maybe, of Wilyer Abreu and David Hamilton at second base. I have my
You mean
thoughts
you
about
mean Rafaela?
who did I say?
He said Willier at second, which would be
Oh, there.
unbelievable.
Right. That would be something. Rafaela and Hamilton platooning at second, and Anthony playing pretty much every day in the outfield, presumably in left, with Duran able to move over to center. That's a distinct possibility. The fact is, we don't know.
Hmm.
I will say this: all three of these kids, and that's what they are, from 21 to 23 years old, are remarkably grounded young men. I wouldn't say that about every prospect that's come up here. They say the right things and they mean it. They understand the context. They understand the environment into which they're arriving. They know there are going to be tough times. They've seen each other. Anthony has seen Christian Campbell make a major league roster out of spring training and be rookie of the month for March and April. And as you said, fail spectacularly in the month of May. June has seen a little bit of a turnaround for him, so we'll see where that goes. But they've seen that this is not uh, something that you come up and dominate initially, but they say all the right things. And that's a testament not only to how they've been brought up, but I think also the Red Sox player development program, which has given them the proper base and the proper training and perspective that, hey, this is not you come up and light the league on fire. Very few. I find it fascinating that the more attention and focus and celebration there is of top young prospects in the game, the more rare it is to see them come up and dominate right out of the chute.
Hmm.
We talked endlessly about Holiday in Baltimore and how he has struggled. He was Roman Anthony a little more than a year ago,
Right.
and he still hasn't really gotten it into gear at the big leagues. He's been better this year, but he came up and failed such to the point that the Orioles sent him back. And then when he came back in the latter part of the season, he was a little better, but still not great. And he's still not great this year. So this is a reminder that prospect rankings don't mean jack when you're all of a sudden facing quality, top of the line pitching and opposition every single day. We've also heard evaluators and scouts say that this is the gap between AAA and the big leagues has perhaps never been greater. That last step is a big one, and we're going to see all of them fail. We've already seen Campbell fail. Doesn't mean his career is over. He's not good, and they wasted money on him. He's failing at the big league level. And the other thing to take into account is these guys have not experienced failure before. They've
Hmm.
been the best player on their high school team. In the case of Campbell, he was one of the best players on his college team. They came up and raked at every affiliate level, and then they get here and they struggle. And the fact that they haven't buckled under or they haven't collapsed under the weight of that disappointment is again evidence of how well they've been prepared, even if they're not dominating every day.
Yeah, no, I couldn't be more impressed with them in their interviews. They're different. Campbell's, because of his rise and his background and the quick prospect rise and not being a blue chipper, had that wide-eyed like, wow, this is happening to me, trying to adjust on the fly. With Anthony and Meyer, they've kind of viewed their big league debuts as
The next
a
logical step.
guarantee. Yeah, right, forever. And we've seen that over the last couple of days. Like Anthony, calm, cool, collected yesterday as you could possibly be. Um, and the struggles that are inevitable, we talked about on one of the last couple shows, Trout and Judge and their first, few months in the big leagues, their numbers, not going to go through them again like we did. Um, but these things happen. It is, rare to see guys hit the ground running. I guess Abreu did it here a couple of Septembers ago, but, other guys, you look at Duran, obviously, as well documented as you possibly can get from a Red Sox perspective. And, Devers was pretty good as a rookie in 17 and 18, but he also was platooning with Eduardo Nunez in the World Series in that whole year. And, there's countless examples of this where,
Listen, Casas.
yep, Casas and guys who, have come up with fanfare. Not quite like this. I think Anthony's a different level fanfare wise, but patience is important. And that's why I think, you know, it's not a second guess because if Abreu is going to be out for 10 days or 2 weeks, you're not going to call up Nate Eaton. I mean, you can't do that to the fan base when you're do it right now. I mean, you just can't. But the second guess here is, you know, that all that talk about not asking them to be saviors. In a perfect world, these guys would come up a little later in the year on a strong contending team and be really bit characters to a really strong core of veterans who are performing and healthy, whether that be Bregman, Devers, Abreu. Casas would have been, healthy in a perfect world. Story would not have struggled in a perfect world. Right? This is not how the Red Sox drew it up. To have Roman Anthony playing a position he has not played much of, especially at a tough right field at Fenway, and hit fifth in his major league debut. I don't think that's what Alex Cora would have drawn up in February or March. It's just where they are. So that's, I think, the tough part of all of this is you have Meyer hitting cleanup early. You have Campbell hitting cleanup already. You have Anthony hitting fifth in his big league debut. Campbell, all the positional stuff, playing in the outfield where he doesn't look super comfortable. The first base stuff that they put an end to. Meyer playing third in the big leagues. Anthony playing right. It has not been perfect, but they have come up as the result of injuries, 2 out of the 3, and it's kind of, the situation they've come into. So again, they talked all winter about not having them be saviors. I guess at this point they have no choice. And really, with the team that struggled all year, with an offense that sputtered all year, they are asking to be saviors, even if, Cora and Breslow and everyone else will say, no, they just need to do their part. And that I think is a little unfortunate, but again, just where they are.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have nights now where 4 of the 9 starters in your everyday lineup are rookie players. The
Mm-hmm.
big three of Campbell, Meyer, and Anthony, along with Carlos Narvaez behind the plate. That's amazing that a team with designs. Look, we know that the first 2.5 months, first 10 weeks of the season have not gone anywhere near how the Red Sox anticipated or would have hoped, but they, for all their struggles, they're 4.5 games out of a wild card. They are not out of contention. They've got some ground to make up. They've got things they've got to do much better, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But this team still wants to and hopes to be in the playoff race in September. And there are going to be nights where 45% of the lineup are actual classified rookies. And that's very rare in today's game, even as rookies and prospects get to the big leagues faster than ever with less developmental time at the big league, at the minor league level. It's just a confluence of events that have created this. Another thing that we should point out, there are going to be nights, and we've already seen it with Marcelo Meyer, where Rob Refsnyder is going to be playing instead of Roman Anthony. And
Mm-hmm.
that's because Alex Cora is trying to win games here. I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago in the Major League Notebook. He's trying to develop and win at the same time. That's not easy.
Right.
But you can't throw, no matter how talented they may be, in the case of Meyer and Anthony as left-handed hitters, you can't throw them up against, the Carlos Rodones and other elite lefties. They're going to probably see him this weekend when the Yankees come in.
And
And,
Freed.
right. Max Fried, there are going to be other top lefties coming in the coming weeks, and there are going to be days and nights when Rob Refsnyder's in the lineup instead of Marcelo Meyer. And we've already seen there being nights where Abraham Toro's in the lineup instead of Marcelo Meyer. And that's because he's got to put the best lineup out there to try to win that night. And as good as these kids are, that matched up against some of the best left-handers in the game, particularly with how Ref Snyder crushes lefties
And
and how
Romy.
Toro has hit left and right in the last couple of weeks, they stand a better chance of winning that night's game going with those guys, kind of journeyman ball players, both, than they are turning things over and asking these top prospects to jump into the deep end and swim right away.
Yeah, and I think it is a really, really, tough thing to sell to fans that, all right, these guys are our future, but only, 65% of games right now. And if there's pinch hit opportunities late, we saw Meyer and Anthony both pinch hit for last night. Like with all the hype around them, and Cora was, he doesn't like necessarily being questioned on in-game decisions. So you're gonna, the questions you have to ask. I asked about, Meyer and Anthony probably haven't been pinch hit for. He said, no, they haven't been pinch hit for in the minors, like
Why,
ever.
why would you? I
Right.
mean, they were the best players
So
again on whatever team they were at. Greenville, Portland, Worcester. There was not a better option on the bench
right.
for those minor league managers.
When you look at though, take away the name Roman Anthony and take away the name Marcelo Meyer and all the hype and all the potential. When you look at on June 9th, who's a better matchup against Garrett Cleavinger? Uh, A or B? Uh, Romy Gonzalez is player A and Marcelo Meyer is player B. Is Marcelo Meyer going to be probably way better of a player in the future than Romy? Of course. And do we expect Anthony's career to be better than Ref Snyder? Of course. But in that situation, when you're trying to win that day, it's June 10th. It's not February 10th. Alex Cora has data and stats that say we have a 10% better chance or a 15% better chance of having a good outcome with Romy Gonzalez stepping up. And that's a tough pill to swallow for a fan base that's excited and wants to see these guys, but that's the modern game, and it is. And there are spots where I think Cora is going to let them, in certain situations, get used to big league pitching or big league lefties. But it's a much different level, triple A lefties versus big league lefties. Everything it's very different. So again, imperfect, but if they were 15 games above 500, maybe there's a little breathing room, but they're not,
Sure.
and they got to get
Or
back on track.
or 15 games below where the
Yeah.
season has been officially tanked and you're developing instead of trying to get back into the playoff race. Then you let them learn at their own pace. You let them fail. You let them learn from that, but they can't afford to do that. They've got ground to make up,
Yep.
and he's got to make that delicate balance, the juggling act of making sure that these guys are integrated into the major league lineup, but still keeping his eye on the standings and realizing that using what we'll euphemistically call major league journeymen, Ref Snyder and Gonzalez, will give you a better chance of winning on that night in that matchup than turning things over to guys who have, five big league at bats or 30 big league at bats.
And when we do this and we have this conversation, inevitably we'll get the "you're in the bag for Cora" type of thing. He's been consistent with this for his entire time managing. I think most managers are in the same boat. And on a side note, I think we both agreed Hamilton for Wong instead of Narvaez for Wong last night was absolutely inexplicable. And
Yeah, well, I mean, you had the platoon matchup of right left with Hamilton, and Narvaez obviously hits right-handed. But in that case, you're going to use Narvaez in the game to replace Connor Wong anyway. David Hamilton, platoon splits aside, is not a big enough reason to burn two guys for one move. Never mind the fact that I'd rather take my chances these days
yeah,
with Narvaez right on right than Hamilton left on right.
and probably something to ask him today when we get there. Other note on this, all wrapping up the Roman Anthony Wilyer Abreu news from yesterday. This has been, I think, it doesn't hit you in the face like in other years. Obviously, the Costas injury and the Bregman injury were big ones. But with everything going on, it's been a little tamped down in importance. This team is really hurt. And I think, it's not an excuse. They have not played well when they've been at full strength. A lot of the guys on the list I'm about to read have not given you anything and were way below expectations when they were on the field. But if you were to tell somebody on June 10th the Red Sox were without Cutter Crawford, Tanner Houck, Justin Slayton, and Liam Hendricks, that's theoretically two of your five starters. And on opening day, you're heading in your seventh and eighth inning guys. And then from the lineup, Bregman, Casas, Abreu, and Yoshida. Obviously, Yoshida has been out the whole time, Casas most of the year. If we had this conversation on February 10th, you would say, wow, they must be bad. Because that's a lot of production on both sides of the ball that they are missing. I know that Casas wasn't giving them
Can
much.
I counter? Can I counter with three names for you?
Yeah,
Garrett Cole, Giancarlo Stanton, and
right.
Luis Steele.
Yeah,
Those are bigger losses to me for the Yankees than any of the guys, with the possible exception of Bregman, are for the Red Sox. Yeah, Tanner Houck was an all-star last year, but he hadn't been pitching well. Yeah, Casas has promise, but he hadn't been hitting. We're talking about three, the rookie of the year, a Cy Young Award candidate, and a guy who, yeah, has struggled, have been inconsistent during the regular season, but is a pretty valuable right-handed bat for the Yankees. Injuries are a fact of life, never more so than in the modern era, where despite all the advances in training and sports science and recovery time and nutrition, all of that, guys get hurt more and more and miss more and more time. It's a fact of life. And I don't think the Red Sox can lean on that to
no,
explain where they are. Is
no,
it a fact? Yes. Has it hurt them? Of course it has. But everybody's got injuries.
right. I'm not. I did
I understand you weren't making an
I did
excuse.
qualify with this is an excuse, but when you look at it now, it's like, yeah, okay, there are eight theoretically pretty good contributors that are out. Obviously, other guys missed time and have been back. Underperformance is the story of the year. Don't get me wrong, but
Yes.
when you look at it now, the lineup with the fact that Anthony Meyer and Campbell are in the lineup make it look better because we've heard those names for so long. But the fact you're missing Casas, Bregman, and Abreu, that's three of your best four hitters, really, and that's a big deal. Let's get into the actual games. We talked a little bit about it. Two out of three in New York. I neither of us were there. Both uh, away, and it was a Chris Smith special. Two of the better wins for the Red Sox of the year, probably on Saturday and Sunday. A good series victory, no matter how you slice it. Walker Bueller, I've told you for months now that you can't trust him. We saw that Friday night. Um, Last night is like a microcosm of the season in so many ways to me, where you have momentum, you've won three out of four, you have your best series win in some time, you come home. There's obviously the excitement, energy that you wrote about with Anthony coming up, and they play kind of objectively horribly, right? Like we got some shit on Twitter for saying the 4 for 23 with the runners in scoring position was the story of the game. I think it was one of the main stories of the game. They did not play
Yeah,
well in the
not the only
field.
one, but a principal one.
They didn't pitch well late. Bernardino was bad. Kelly, with walks. Sloppy Bernardino with his fourth fielding error of the year. Duran, he wasn't charged with an error on that play, right? But it could have been.
Right.
Anthony obviously had the error, throwing the ball around, wild pitch, all the stuff that's plagued them all year. They scored 8 runs. That's great, whatever. Um, but 4 for 23 with runners in scoring position. That means they could have
I
scored
take it
14.
over that they had 23 at bats with runners in scoring position.
Right.
I was in the elevator coming down after the game and mentioned that to somebody. They made me repeat it twice, and then noted that there are series where you don't have 23 at bats with runners in scoring position.
Right.
To have that many in one game and to get four lousy hits is an indictment of the approach at the plate. There's no question that situational hitting continues to be an issue here.
Right.
It's not the only one. You can't be walking guys with the bases loaded. You can't be giving unearned runs away almost on a nightly basis as they've done. You can't be leading the league in errors as they are. But I thought last night was all about needing about two more well-timed hits to put that game out of reach earlier.
Yeah, we can break down the ins and outs and the bad parts of the roster, and we do that twice a week on the Fenway Rundown podcast. I would say it's just that like intangible. They can't grab momentum. I know you wrote about it last week, but last night felt to me like the worst instance of it yet.
Yeah, they come home, as you said, took two out of three, came back and in both of those games, erased early deficits, pounded the ball against the Yankees, had some life to their lineup, and you figure, okay, they're coming home for 6 games here before a long West Coast road trip. Build on that, take 2 out of 3 from Tampa, beat the Yankees again 2 out of 3. That gets you back to about 500, maybe a game over as you get ready to go west. And I'm going to do this later today. Their record in first games of
Yeah,
series
that's literally what
has
I'm
to,
looking up. 9-13.
yeah, it feels like it's about 9-33.
Yeah.
I mean, I know obviously they haven't played that many series. I'm shocked that they're as close to 500 as that record suggests in those games because we have seen Monday night unfold time and again. They go on the road or they have a series and they win a series, and you figure, okay, let's see what they do with this. And then they face plant in game one of the next series and lose all momentum that they had been building.
And you know what? Like, Brian Bayo wasn't the problem last night. Quick hook, maybe. He was okay. He was more efficient than he's been. When you have Giolito and Bueller, tonight and tomorrow after the starts they just had, you have to be worried that, they're not going to be able to do take the final two of the series thing because, what we saw from Giolito the other day for like the third or fourth time was, tough to watch. Obviously, Bueller on Friday, he called himself an embarrassment, Chris Sale style. And, to think they're going to be able to win both of these games the next two nights, kind of a tall ask. And then, the Yankees come in.
Except that is not a very good lineup over there.
Right.
I mean,
But it never is, but they find ways.
well, I know that seems kind of funny when they scored 10 runs against the Red Sox last night, but they are not, and usually are not, a good offensive team. They can do the little things. They rely on platoon advantages. They have guys and discover them and get the most out of them. All credit to the Rays front office and Kevin Cash. But usually when they beat you, it's because of pitching and something they're doing, the little parts of the game. You should not be giving up 10 runs to that lineup. It's just not that good.
And then over the weekend, a Red Sox team that has struggled against lefties for a couple of years, and we've seen that now. They are this year 7-9 in games against lefties. They are 25-26 against right-handed starters. Three of them come in: Yarbrough, who gives you a different look, and then Rodon and Fried on the Saturday Sunday with the Yankees before that long West Coast trip. So, this feels like a homestand where they needed to come in, be good, grasp the momentum. So far, no such thing. So,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, no, couldn't agree more.
We'll be back at Fenway tonight. Red Sox and Rays, second out of three. Again, it'll be Giolito against Pepio on the mound. We'll be back with another Fenway rundown later in the week. There's no more top prospects to call up, so we're not going to cover that, but we'll keep you posted on everything else.